Hey, it's Greg Schenkel. Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance Podcast. And I'm glad you've joined us for this episode. I think you're going to really love it. Again, our whole mantra is really to give you some valuable tips and tools that can help you on your leadership journey, help you get your team more engaged, and also to accelerate some of those things you're trying to get done in terms of improvement projects. And today's guest is Lori De Silva. She's the General Manager and CEO of RBC Place London, formerly known as the London Convention Centre Corporation. And as the GM and CEO, Lori reports to the Board of Directors, which is appointed by the City of London's Council. The City of London owns the building, and Lori runs the London Convention Centre Corporation as a mid-size hospitality business with a mandate to drive economic impact for the community. Lori has been in this role for 18 years and is actually, at the time that this podcast is published, is retiring after that long, many years of service. She spent 40 years in London's hospitality sector. Now, 2023 was an outstanding recovery year for RBC Place London, as you can imagine, after COVID, or COVID basically shut the business down. But in that recovery year after COVID, it generated $22.6 million in economic impact for London and area, and it achieved a new revenue record, which is amazing to hear, of $7.2 million. So please join me in welcoming Lori De Silva to the Accelerating Operational Performance Podcast. Lori, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Good morning, Greg.
Hey. So, Lori, you know, the cool thing of talking to you after you've already made this decision to retire, and I should point out for the audience's benefit that Lori's someone who I've known for more than 10 years. We were both members of a community service organization called Rotary International, but also I've had the pleasure of working with Lori and her team over the years on some different projects. And I just know her to be this amazing person who really adds a lot of value to her team and also just to the community in London. So, Lori, the one thing I like to start with, this is a great time to be retrospective for you, is when you look back, and by the way, just for the audience's benefit, I do send some ideas ahead of time, but then inevitably in our conversation we do take some different trails. But I'm interested, Lori, in something that really what you reflect back on was a tremendous win, right? Like something that was a success, and it could be a recent one or it could be something earlier on. But what comes to mind when you think of something that's gone well?
Well, and I think to put it in perspective, I mean, what we do is live events. So if you kind of think of us like live theater, when we are performing, it's in front of an audience and there is no second takes. We can't, there's no do-overs really.
Right.
So it is live. And I think that when you think about that sort of thing, for us coming into each and every event, the most crucial things are to be organized, to have a huge amount of communication throughout, and to have a really well-trained team ready to go. And whenever we do an event, we have a backup plan for the backup plan because, again, everything is live, so you need to really be flexible and nimble.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've had some amazingly popular events and publicly popular events, things like hosting the Junos or Country Music Week's gala. We've had massive conferences in the building, like the Ontario Association of Municipalities, which we held last August. It turned out to be a record number of attendees for them. I don't know if that was a post-pandemic, everybody wanted to get there, but we hosted 2,500 people in the building, which is huge for our building from a conference point of view, and it took every team member being active. But one example I will give you is we hosted a wedding a couple of years ago, and we do weddings, but not tons of weddings. This particular wedding was held on New Year's Eve, so a tough night to get everybody to work. But what it required to pull it off was that our entire culinary team was obviously working, our event services team, and many of our administrative team also volunteered to work that night because we needed to have all hands on deck to make that one happen. So to me, that was probably a memorable, successful event just because it involved everybody pulling together, pulling in the same direction, and doing a little bit extra.
Awesome. That is good. Now, knowing that you've been in hospitality for a long time, actually, I have a related question to that, but it's probably going to have you go back a bit in the time machine, and it might not even be at the London Convention Center RBC Place. I'm wondering, you know that when people are in their career journey, at first you're not sure, you don't have a lot of self-confidence, but usually there's a time in your career where you kind of finally go, I think I got this. I think I'm confident. And I wondered, can you remember when that was for you, when you kind of went from, I think a lot of people start off almost feeling like they're an imposter, and then they finally kind of get into their rhythm and they understand that they're bringing a lot of value. Do you know when that was in your career? When did you feel like, I got this, I am pretty effective at doing this?
So for me, it would have been pre the convention center. I was actually the director of sales and marketing at the Delta Hotel, the Delta London Armories, and I had applied for a position as the general manager at Spencer Leadership Center, which was falling under the Richard Ivey School of Business at the time and being managed by Dolce International. And I went for the interview, and I actually knew one of the a former colleague who was working for that organization, which is how I was connected. But I went for the interview, and I was being interviewed by one of their vice presidents. And halfway through the interview, he actually said to me, I'm sorry, what position are you applying for? Because they were also looking for a director of sales. And of course, I was a current director of sales. And I stopped him and said, no, I'm not applying for the director of sales position. I want to be the general manager. So I think that for me was probably that turning point when I went, aha, I've got this, and I'm going for it.
And then you did get that. And just for,
yes.
Again, for the benefit of our of any listeners from the United States, which is a big part of our audience base, is this is, think of Harvard Business School, because Ivy Business School is sort of the Harvard of the North. I guess maybe every business school in Canada tries to claim that. But really, it is one of the premier institutions, and this was really their executive learning center. Now they actually run a lot of their both executive MBA classes and even some regular MBA classes through there. So Lori, that was your time to step up, which I think is a great lesson for anybody. You know, when you know you're ready for the next leap, you have to step in and own that, because people are looking to see your confidence. I always think hiring is a confidence thing in both directions. The candidate has to show that they're confident that they can do it, so that the person hiring them feels confident it's a good decision. So that's awesome. Now, usually, you know, we want to then go from, because I do believe that you learn something from both the good stuff and probably from some of the struggles. And I know it's always one of those interview questions in a job interview. It's like, so what's something that's not so great? And then, of course, you try to put a positive spin on it. But let me ask you, can you think back to a challenge? I mean, I know you guys just went through one. So what's with COVID? What's a challenge that comes to mind, and what did you learn from it?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest challenges for us of late was COVID, completely out of control, and we were mandated to close, which meant we laid off the majority of our team. In fact, I think at one point we had 95% of our team laid off. So that was certainly challenging. Many of our team members are part-time, and many did have other jobs that they were able to sort of focus on during that period. Some were able to transfer their skills, and that's the nice thing about the hospitality industry. Everybody learns lots of transferable skills, especially dealing with people, dealing with high-stress situations, time management, all those good things that can be transferable. So many of them were able to work in other industries, but we did lay off, as I said, 95%. The challenging period, obviously, was not knowing, and no one knew. Are we going to open again? When would we open again? So many of the events were postponed. If those in the spring were delayed to the fall, some were delayed to the following spring, and then, of course, we repeated that period, scenario several times. We had groups that rebooked, their event 3-4 times before they actually were able to host it again. And then when we did get the call saying we could open again, it was limited. You could have 50 people in a room. Well, we're used to hosting events of 1,000,
Right.
and you could have 250 people in a room at one point, but no dancing. So there went any of the social functions that
Right.
were booked. So it was challenging that way. But one of the things that did come out of that was very positive was that we looked at our core services and our core strengths and recognize that we have one of the best kitchens in the community. It's well equipped. We have a talented culinary team with 2 certified chef de cuisines as our leadership group in there, and all our culinary team for the most part is a Red Seal chef qualified person. So we had this really talented team, this huge space, and how could we help the community? So we ended up connecting with the food bank and actually creating meals that were picked up and delivered by 519 Pursuit and taken out to those living rough on the streets.
Wow.
It was a very helpful community endeavor then, which also turned into supporting the city through their winter response program. At one point, we were doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner for people who were being accommodated in trailers in different places. So we actually were able to really look at our core strengths and to turn it around and say, how can we help the community during that very challenging time?
Awesome. So that's how community-minded Lori is too, and her team. What amazed me, by the way, as a post log to that, is I had an opportunity to work with Lori's team a couple of months ago, and having worked with them before COVID, it was amazing to me to see how many people returned, which I think also speaks to the organization, whereas a lot of hospitality folks had trouble recruiting back talented or skilled people. You seem to get most of your core team, I think, stayed with you and came back. Isn't that true?
Yes, and we're very fortunate to be able to do that. So we're celebrating some people being with us for 25 years, but we've got lots who have been with us for 5 and 10 years, and a very solid team that way. I mean, we're always recruiting and bringing on team members. We have a team of about 105, and probably about 35 to 40 are full-time core members, and the rest then are part-time. So we very much gear up for events. One day we've got a very quiet building. The next day, we could have a conference for 600 people for 3 days, which we're bringing in a lot of people. We're serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and really moving. So sometimes we kind of consider ourselves like the ducks on the pond. You don't see our little legs moving, but it all seems very calm on the surface, and that's when we know things are going really well. But yeah, we're very fortunate to have that core team come back, and many of them have been with us for many years.
So I have to take you back to March of 2020, right, or February 2020, when because I think we can all, it's 4 years ago now, everybody, but we can all kind of go back in our time machine to some degree and realize how startling it was. We knew something was happening, but then it seemed to be sort of sudden. And I just wondered, like, were you either caught off? I mean, we were all caught off guard to some degree, but I was curious when you sort of grappled with that very sudden, dramatic change where basically your business shuts down. Can you go back to that time and just walk us through a little bit of what was going on and how it unfolded just in the early days? Because I think from a change perspective, talk about an unplanned change. But did you have a sense of it even for the weeks leading up to the shutdown, which would have, I guess, been in March?
You know what? I don't think we thought it was going to be as severe and as long as it turned out to be. Yeah. When we first were getting word that there was an issue, I think we were all sort of thinking back, and many of us had been around long enough to know what happened to Toronto during SARS. Mm-hmm. So we had that in the back of our mind, and it never shut our industry down completely. So when we actually got the call that we were closing completely, we really thought, okay, this is a 2 weeks, month hiatus. Let's figure this out. So as I said, laid off a lot of our team members. Many of our other team members were just like, hold tight. And we are, of course, an organization where we all come to work. Right. So the whole idea of remote working was very foreign. Now, luckily, we had started moving to having laptops for everybody so that those that did have laptops were able to pack up and set up an office in their home, and we were able to continue that way. But the whole idea of, hybrid working or remote working was quite foreign for us at the time because, again, we're the live events industry. So it was challenging, and certainly we didn't have any sense that it would be beyond 2 weeks to a month. We really were focused on postponing the events that we had for the rest of March. And for April, I know myself, my niece was getting married. It was a destination wedding in April, and we still planned on going at the time. So I had no idea that it was going to be that long. But when we did realize it was going to be lengthier, and some of the immediate things we did was knowing we were down for 2 weeks or knowing we were down for a month, the culinary team went through the fridges and looked at what needed to go, because obviously we had food we donated to the Men's Mission, to some of the other organizations, and for some of our staff we sent food home with them because it was going to spoil otherwise, and monitor what was in the freezers. Of course, with the delay in the closing, we started cleaning out freezers and donating that food and starting to look at sort of longer term what we needed to do if there was parts of the building that needed to be shut down, or how we could reduce energy usage by closing off certain periods or certain sections of the building. So those sorts of physical changes started taking place. Yeah.
I think we can all relate back to, this is just going to be like a 2-week pause, and then then it got extended, and then even when it reopened, it kind of came back. And you're right, there were a lot of rules around that. We're doing this interview over Zoom, and of course, online meetings came out of nowhere and became normal. And to some degree, we're still using it a lot I'm sure you're using it a lot with customers and clients. Even coming out of COVID, there must have been a little bit of concern with meetings going virtual. I mean, there were conferences, of course, that went virtual out of necessity. But you've had such a good rebound year coming out of COVID, and we know that some people just wanted to get together. But can you talk about sort of this idea of online meetings and virtual meetings and how much it swung back to in-person, and even how you reflect on that, because you must have been somewhat concerned that there was going to be this big strategic shift away from in-person meetings?
Certainly. So we actually, recognizing that virtual meetings and hybrid meetings were going to be part of our industry going forward, we actually worked with our audiovisual partner and had a studio set up in the building. We had some groups, when they needed to have lots of space, actually use our ballroom wide open for a group of 20 to do it was a band actually that was being filmed, so they performed in our ballroom with no one else around them but the crew that was filming and capturing the footage. So we actually looked to embrace the fact that might be part of our industry going forward. And certainly we hosted a number of hybrid meetings as we sort of move forward during that period. In fact, we hosted our own when we celebrated Global Meetings Industry Day, because we anticipated having an audience, and then the audience portion of it was canceled, so we actually just went with a full virtual meeting. I think what we also did was monitor what the experts were saying and collected as much research from around the world as we could. I mean, we're in an industry where we've got colleagues all over the world, and many countries handled the situation very differently.
True.
Some embraced full-on events continuing through the entire period. Others were hybrid and virtual for much longer. So there was all kinds of different models out there, and certainly the information that was coming back was they're great, but event planners were starting to see their costs double when they were hosting, because when they did host a hybrid, they had the cost of the in-person group, and then they had equal costs for the virtual component, recognizing you can't just put a camera in the room and film everybody who's there for the meeting. You needed to have added content. So I think the industry learned an awful lot. And one scenario I remember seeing is that if you think about a very large sporting event that's televised, the group who are actually attending have one experience. The group who are watching the televised experience have a different kind of experience. Both are equally great, and both have to be managed
and both have
and
extreme
gets
costs,
edited.
right? Yeah, both have extreme costs. I was gonna. That's a really good way of saying it, because we also have clients, even now, where they'll say, "Oh, we have one or two remote viewers if we're doing a training session or something," I push back on them, because I say, "Look, our prime concern are the people in the room, and everything we do is designed for them." I said, if you really want to have a hybrid experience, and if there's enough need for it, I said, we have to have, for instance, Terry come out and help produce that as far as the event goes. But I will say it is tough to carry it off. Just a quick question, though, is are you still doing that, or is it swung mostly back to just for the live in-person group?
I would say most have swung back completely to the live in-person. And I think one of the things they realized was if you have a relationship with people already, virtual works. If you don't have a relationship with people, it makes it very challenging to really establish that with a virtual. So most people have attended events live in person and have been very thankful to get back to seeing people. It's been actually quite interesting to watch the emotions and the reactions people have had to see each other again.
I would agree. So this must be a time, because I know that you've announced your retirement probably a few months ahead of when it's actually happening, and I'm sure it's kind of emotional for you and others. And knowing that you're not just retiring off into the sunset, there'll be something that captures your attention perhaps after a bit of well-deserved rest. But I'm wondering, as you think back, even though I asked you about a success earlier, is there something that you're proud of, that you reflect on as you're going, something that makes you feel good as you're moving into retirement as another stage in your life? Is there something you're particularly proud of having accomplished?
I think when I think about this building, when I first got here, the building's owned by the city. It was very much, the focus of the team at the time was very much on managing the building, maintaining the building, securing the building. And I came along from the hospitality industry and said, the building's great, but if there's no people in the building,
it's
what's
just a
the
building.
point?
Yeah, it's just a building.
So we've very much focused on the team and our clients. And I think if I'm leaving a legacy, it's a very strong team, a very determined team, a very capable team, and a well-trained team.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the audience's benefit, Lori had the foresight to know that it's a pretty big change after you've worked under one senior leader for a long time. So we did a session on trying to help people just understand, change is inevitable. It's a good thing, and you've certainly left your team in good stead. I have one final question for you. It's your chance to give advice, to somebody who's maybe like you were earlier in your career, where you're kind of got a functional department that you're looking after, but maybe you've got some aspirations to do more. I just was curious if you were giving if you were going to give advice as a mentor or a coach to someone. What would you tell somebody who's earlier on in their career about how to think about how to achieve success as they go along?
So one of the things, I guess, I've been around for a while, and maybe I've learned some of the lessons old school as opposed to newer thoughts, but definitely one of the things that helped me very quickly is, I started out in sales, and I realized that when you walk into any building, if you are polite, kind, respectful of everybody, then it gets you much further in life.
Yeah.
And I often use this scenario. I remember distinctly calling on an organization here in London and very politely talking to the person at the front desk who was the gatekeeper and wasn't going to allow me to get in to see their boss, which was perfectly fine. I ended up striking up a relationship and, got in to see that person's boss when I did, and moved on. Years later, that gatekeeper became the president of an organization. And I realized, those first impressions are so important. And it doesn't matter if in our industry, if you are the person cleaning the floors or serving the table or prepping the meal, or the senior leadership team. You treat everybody equally and respectfully. It gets you much, much further in life.
You know what, that's so awesome, and I think a great way for us to move into wrapping up. I know that you've led by example in that regard. And the other thing for maybe everyone to know is as technology comes in and systems and software, it's very easy and tempting to dehumanize. And remember that human beings still like to be treated with respect and dignity. And I think too often we're judging and we get into these levels. And so Lori's lesson, I think, is a good one. I don't think it's old school, Lori. I think it's just persistent. So I just wanted to say congratulations on having a tremendous career. I know you're kind of keeping your mind open for what might happen after taking a well-deserved break. So I have this sense that someone like you will definitely be able to add value somewhere else, doing something else. So just congrats on your career. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. If people, by the way, just want to check it out, this world-class meeting facility, remember, whether you've got a dinner for 1,000 people or a conference of 100 or 200 people in London, Ontario, beautiful city, you can visit rbcplacelondon.com, rbcplacelondon.com. And of course, you can always look up Lori De Silva on LinkedIn if you want to connect with her. Lori, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I think everyone will benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.